Imagine being told you couldn't buy food, couldn't sell your car, couldn't even get a job, all because you're missing a specific mark. Today, we're diving into one of religion's most controversial symbols, the mark of the beast. We'll explore how both Christianity and the Baha'i faith interpret this powerful concept and what it means for understanding religious prophecy in our modern world.
And it's fascinating how this symbol has captured human imagination for nearly 2 millennia while meaning different things to different faiths.
Let's start with the basics. Where does this concept of the mark of the beast actually come from?
Well, it all begins in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 16 and 17. The text describes a mark required on the right hand or forehead, without which people couldn't buy or sell.
And this is where the infamous number 666 comes in, right?
Exactly. The original Greek text uses the numerals chi, xi, and stigma to represent 666. It's described as the number of a man.
You know, it's interesting how this number has taken on such a life of its own in popular culture.
Oh, absolutely. But what's really fascinating is how this symbolism emerged during a specific historical context, during the persecution of Christians under the Roman Empire.
Really? Tell me more about that historical context.
Well, during the reign of Emperor Domitian, between 81 and 96 AD, Christians faced intense persecution. The mark was likely a reference to the oppressive power of the Roman Empire.
That's fascinating. You know, I've heard some people interpret this very literally, while others see it as purely symbolic.
Right, and that's where Christian interpretations have really diverged over time. We see three main views: the preterist, historicist, and futurist interpretations.
Could you break those down for us?
Sure. Preterists see it as referring to historical figures like Nero. Historicists view it as representing various anti-Christian powers throughout history, and futurists believe it points to a future entity or system.
Interesting. And this is where the Baha'i faith offers a different perspective, right?
Yes, the Baha'i faith approaches this through their concept of progressive revelation, the idea that religious truth is revealed progressively through different messengers of God.
Can you explain that concept a bit more?
The Baha'i faith teaches that God sends divine messengers called manifestations of God throughout history. These include figures like Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah.
And how does this relate to their interpretation of apocalyptic symbols like the mark of the beast?
They see these symbols as representing spiritual truths rather than literal events. The mark represents allegiance to materialistic forces that oppose spiritual development.
You know, that reminds me of something interesting. In ancient Rome, slaves and soldiers were actually branded with marks showing ownership.
Yes, that historical practice likely influenced the imagery in Revelation. It was a powerful symbol people would have immediately understood.
So both faiths see this mark as symbolic of choosing between spiritual and worldly authority?
Exactly. While they approach it differently, both see it as representing a fundamental choice about spiritual allegiance.
But Christians tend to see it more as a specific future event?
Many do, particularly those following the futurist interpretation. They expect a literal marking system tied to economic participation.
While the Baha'i faith sees it more as an ongoing spiritual dynamic?
Right. They view it as part of the eternal struggle between materialism and spiritual values, rather than a one-time historical event.
You mentioned earlier about progressive revelation. How does that shape their view of apocalyptic prophecies in general?
Well, they see prophecies as having multiple layers of meaning that unfold over time, adapting to humanity's evolving spiritual capacity.
That's quite different from the traditional Christian view.
Yes, though some Christian scholars also recognize multiple layers of prophetic meaning. It's not entirely black and white.
Let's talk about how these different interpretations affect believers' daily lives.
For many Christians, especially those expecting a literal fulfillment, it creates vigilance about economic and technological changes.
And for Baha'is?
They focus more on maintaining spiritual priorities in a materialistic world, seeing it as an ongoing challenge rather than a future crisis.
It's interesting how the same symbol can inspire such different responses.
And that's really the power of religious symbolism. It adapts to different contexts while maintaining core spiritual truths.
You know, in popular culture, 666 has become almost a cliché.
True, but that actually shows how deeply these religious symbols can embed themselves in cultural consciousness.
Do you think that trivializes the deeper meaning?
Not necessarily. Sometimes popular culture can actually help keep important spiritual questions in public discourse.
Let's talk about how these interpretations might evolve in our increasingly digital world.
Well, some Christians see modern technology as potentially fulfilling the prophecy, literally, digital IDs, cryptocurrency, that sort of thing.
while the Bahá'í view would see these as just new contexts for the same spiritual choices?
Exactly. They'd focus on how technology affects our spiritual versus material priorities, rather than seeing it as fulfilling specific prophecies.
It's fascinating how these ancient texts continue to generate new interpretations.
That's the nature of religious scripture. It speaks to each generation in ways they can understand and relate to.
Do you think these different interpretations create barriers between faiths?
They can, but they can also lead to meaningful dialogue about how different faiths understand divine guidance and prophecy.
What would you say is the key takeaway from comparing these interpretations?
That while faiths may differ in their specific interpretations, they often point to similar fundamental spiritual truths about human choice and divine guidance.
And both seem to emphasize the importance of spiritual discernment.
Yes, whether you see it as a future event or an ongoing spiritual reality, both interpretations call for conscious spiritual choices.
It really shows how religious symbols can evolve while maintaining their core message.
And that's perhaps their greatest strength, the ability to speak meaningfully to different cultures and times.
This has been such an enlightening discussion about these different perspectives.
And it shows how examining different faith traditions can deepen our understanding of religious symbols.
Whether literal mark or spiritual metaphor, it's clear this symbol continues to challenge us to think about our deepest allegiances.
And perhaps that's the real power of the symbol, its ability to make us question what truly controls our lives.
Well, that